Alright folks, today I'm here to bring you my thoughts on The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon, The Book of Carol, Episode 5. I am so sick of that long title. AMC recently announced Season 3 was just going to be called Daryl Dixon again with no subtitle, so this season will always just stick out now. But in my last review, I expressed my frustrations building with this series, and unfortunately, despite enjoying this episode more than the previous two, those feelings haven't really gone away. And I think that's because I know these plotlines are wrapping up really soon if they haven't already. The truth is, 12 episodes is just not enough for everything they had going on with the France plotline. And as a result, most of the newly introduced characters have been killed off before they can really make an impact on this universe. It feels like the show is more concerned with rushing to the next country rather than fully fleshing out what's already been presented. Which really sucks because it is an intriguing place to explore in the Walking Dead universe. They show us cool concepts like the runners, but don't explain how the serum was developed or how it really works, which annoys me. But moving on to the actual plot of this episode, we learn Falou had gotten Laurent to safety at his rooftop community following their escape of the nest. And after tracking them down with nowhere else to go, Kader would arrive at their gate as Laurent vouches for him after he saved his life. Kader has honestly become one of the more likable characters this season for me, and I think it's because he isn't blindly loyal. Pavor turned on him and tortured him, so he was disillusioned by their movement, which totally makes sense. And although I didn't expect him to go down this path, I do really like his shift to being an ally. One thing I forgot to mention that I noticed last episode, Pavor was seen taking food from the elderly couple before they were killed in the shootout, which makes me think the food they were delivering for the people of Paris in episode 2 had been taken from those trying to live peacefully outside the city as well. It's little scenes like this that add layers to Pavor. They give the illusion of helping the people, but in reality, they're just stealing from those who can't fight back and then redistributing it under their banner. I wish these concepts were developed a little more, but again, we only have one episode left taking place in France, so I doubt they will be. Now, as Carol and Daryl make their way to Ash and the plane, we of course get more beautiful shots of post-apocalyptic Paris. That is one thing this show has absolutely nailed, and I will praise them for it in every review. The set design is incredible. But arriving at the hangar, the two would discover Ash nowhere to be found. Instead, they find two goons caught in his trap that were sent for the plane who claim he left and didn't come back. However, in the next scene, we see he ended up on the run from the dead, trapping himself in an abandoned car before hitting his head on the door, knocking himself out as the walkers congregate around. Good job, bro. Now, although Ash is somewhere nearby and more than likely in need of help, Daryl and Carol make their way to Falou's rooftop community, the last place their missing allies could really be where they finally reunite with Laurent. He and Carol meeting face to face for the first time was a great scene. I love how he refers to her as Carol from the Commonwealth and speaks about RJ, Judith, and Ezekiel. It just shows how much he cares about Daryl's stories, which I really like. Although, without Isabel in their company, Laurent naturally begins to ask questions, and unfortunately, Daryl is the one who has to break the news of her death. And I don't want to say this scene was poor, but they cut over his actual initial reaction, and come on, any kid would be crying their eyes out if they just found out their parental figure was dead. Laurent's just kinda like, she's with my mom now, which I get they're in the apocalypse and death is all around them, but he was also extremely sheltered at the Abbey his entire life, so I don't know. However, he does later express his grief by saying he doesn't want to go to America as he fears Daryl dying for him like everyone else. Regardless, once settled, Carol finally suggests heading out to look for Ash with Daryl, starting at Quinn's old club that is now under new management, as its owner Anna reveals she was the one who sent the goons after the plane. And as Carol discovers Ash's gas canister within the club, the two learn Gurriers have brought them back while looting Maison Mare, giving Carol and Daryl their destination for finding their lost friend. The club is always a welcome sight in the show. It's so alien for this franchise, so anytime we get to throw a character we know in that setting, I get excited. But following up on their clue, The two arrive at the now overrun ex-Pavor headquarters, which fell following Janae's death and was looted by Gurriers, before spotting a horde of walkers gathered around a car outside the main building, meaning there was at least something alive inside. And after fighting their way in, they would find their injured ally unconscious. However, with this luckily being a Pavor vehicle, Daryl would find himself a syringe gun in the back along with vials of hybrid serum that he would use on the congregating walkers outside, leading to a quick but amazing scene where the runners tear the horde apart in seconds before crashing through the windows and meeting their end. I give the show a lot of flack for how they've handled the lore of the hybrid variants, but I do have to praise the way they are portrayed on screen. They are scary killing machines, and I can only pray they aren't left in the past once we move on to Spain, but I have a feeling they will be. However, while Carol and Daryl escort Ash back to the hangar, we learn Losang, who is now united with Pavor, had found the rooftop community, and they certainly would have gotten their hands on Laurent if Cadron hadn't gone out of his way to sneak him out and get him to the club where they await Daryl's inevitable arrival, which would come rather quickly as he shows up looking for plane fuel. And once reunited, Anna offers to give them all the ethanol they can spare in order to get Laurent to safety. But while doing so, they would be interrupted by Losang and the Gurriers, who arrive at the club searching for the boy, before chasing them deep into the catacombs. Here we get another fantastic action sequence, which this season has been full of. That's another thing I can wholeheartedly praise from the show. The combat is always on point, and the settings of these fights are always really interesting. However, after defeating the Gurriers on their tail while hiding Laurent in the dark, Daryl and Losang would have a one-on-one fight that would end with the disturbed Union of Hope leader's brutal death. I honestly don't really have too much to say here. I know I've been complaining about too many characters dying, but it does actually feel right for Losang to meet his end here. He felt like a one-season villain, whereas Janae felt like she could have been a more extensive villain spanning the whole series in the background. And although an argument could be made for him to have a grander story, I actually quite like him dying as a result of his own delusions. It was always clear they weren't going to succeed in getting Laurent, so this was the most logical direction for his character. However, the scene ends with a cliffhanger that this new lady, who I'm just going to refer to as Janae 2, survived the encounter, and will be coming for Laurent next episode. But I'm just here thinking, why even kill Janae and Losang so early if you're just gonna be in need of a villain for the finale anyway? I don't know, I wasn't crazy about that aspect. But as the episode closes out, Laurent finally agrees to come back to America with Daryl. But we also get to see Ash's reaction to Carol's lie about Sophia, where he, of course, erupts into anger. My prediction in episode 1 was that Ash was gonna leave them all behind after finding out. But with the cliffhanger reveal that the plane won't be able to take off with all 4 of them, the show's presenting a different type of dilemma for the finale, so I don't think that's the direction they're taking. Which kinda makes me wonder what the point of setting up the lie was for if it doesn't really have any consequences on the story. Overall, I did enjoy the episode, but as you can probably tell as these reviews go on, my enthusiasm for the story's direction has dropped quite a bit. Losang's death makes sense in terms of the plot, but with basically every other French character gone at this point, it feels more so like they're clearing house to make room for the new cast members next season. The France storyline not really having any major revelations for the franchise is not sitting well with me at all either. The World Beyond post-credit scene had set up France to be a major player when it came to the lore of the virus, but once we got here and began exploring, it was like a completely different story was developed using the post-credit scene as a non-canon basis to start from. I just can't imagine we're ever going to be revisiting France once Daryl and Carol leave. So I feel as if the opportunity has been missed to expand our knowledge on the early days. The runners were a great spectacle for sure, but that's about it. Again, we just don't know anything else about them. You stick them with a weird serum and they go nuts. That's pretty much all we know. One thing I did not expect when I made my Variants of France video was for it to hold up after the Book of Carol aired. But so far, there's been minimal information given to contradict the theories I gave in that video, besides Pavor created the hybrids themselves. At the very least, I expected to learn how they discovered they could do this in the first place, but we didn't even get that. It's time to move on already, and I feel like we've barely skimmed the surface of the most interesting aspect of this series. If I were to rank this episode, I think I'd give it another 7 out of 10. The apocalyptic Paris visuals were amazing, the brief runner scene was awesome, but I'm just not vibing with the story. It seems the entire point of the last 2 seasons was to get Laurent to safety, which is an okay plot, but I was far more interested in learning if the circumstances around his birth affected him differently. And it kinda seems like we're never gonna get those answers now that they're more than likely gonna get him back to America. There's 1 episode left this season, and I have a feeling it's gonna be more about transitioning to the show's new direction more than anything, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see. I may not be loving the direction of the story, but I definitely want to hear your thoughts on this episode in the comments down below. Do you agree with what I've had to say, or have you been able to see it in a different light? It's totally okay to disagree with me, and if you do, I want to hear all about it. But that's gonna do it for me today, folks. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next week for the finale.